Allied forces have captured a zone.
Make those Lakers burn! Ha ha!
So, about the FV4005, the tank that shook itself apart, the Doombahn, a variant of Doombahn that substitutes the first word with something a little less polite, the largest anti-tank gun ever mounted to a tank. Many very fitting titles have been bestowed upon this vehicle. I think I'll add one of my own to the list. The Wallace and Gromit Tank Destroyer. Yeah, that sounds about right. The FV4005 quite well encapsulates the idea of using a sledgehammer to crack open a walnut. The monstrous 183mm L4A1 gun it carries is the largest anti-tank gun ever fitted to a tank destroyer. Stuff like the M55 do not count, and the infantry howitzers are not tank guns. The Stone Tiger doesn't count, don't you dare comment that, because a mortar firing rockets is not a gun. This thing's firepower is an improvisation, its recoil is yes and. So, what could possibly have convinced the British that something like this was in any way sensible? Well, those of you who have watched my previous video on the Conqueror will know about this funky little green frying pan looking thing, the IS-3, a Soviet steel beast that made all the headlines debuting in the Berlin Victory Parade, looking all big and bad and promptly making all of the Western world swell themselves in terror. You can think of this video as a sort of part 2 to the Conqueror story, exploring the other solution the British found to counter the IS, so make yourself a nice warm cup of tea and enjoy. In the year 1950, fueled by a fear of Soviet invasion that would be spearheaded by the IS-3 heavy tank, development was started on this new 183mm gun, aiming to defeat 152mm of armor sloped 60 degrees at up to 2,000 yards, or 1.8 kilometers as us sensible people who count in base 10 as one would call it. Seeing as Hesh is unaffected by distance, I can't exactly imagine why specifying that was seen as necessary, though maybe this was instead referring to the effective range of the gun and not the round's performance. Anyway, what I can say is this was going to have been completely unheard of for a tank gun at the time. Not even the 120mm L1 on the Conqueror of last video, which I had said was pretty damn powerful, would have been capable of such a feat. So how were the British going to achieve this? Well, first of all, they made the gun bigger, 183mm and all that, but the real interesting part was in the ammunition. That Hesh round that I was previously talking about. Now, I know many people watching this already know all about Hesh, but as it turns out, a sizable portion of my audience is actually relatively unacquainted with tanks, so in the name of spreading information to everyone, I shall give a concise rundown of how Hesh works. So, Hesh rounds, standing for High Explosive Squash Head, achieve damage through plastic explosive, usually something like C4, squashing into the target and then detonating, channeling a shockwave through the enemy armor and causing scabs of metal from said armor to dislodge from that plate and straight into the poor bastard that Stalin ordered to sit behind it. So the round causes the enemy to be killed by his own armor. No wonder the British love Hesh so much, that's cool as hell. It is also good to note that while such an effect is possible, and definitely a more ideal, more thorough form of destruction, a total kill, as it is called, against the more heavily armored targets one might encounter, it may not be always fully effective or possible, in which case the second outcome tends to occur, commonly referred to as a mobility kill, in which, even if the enemy may not necessarily be destroyed, the damn blast of the round simply makes the enemy tank immobile, possibly by ripping the tracks off, disintegrating the wheels off that side of the tank, or some such manner of torture to the poor mechanics that the tank will have to be towed back to over the next few days. Now, I am going to stray away from my usual order of operations where I would typically talk about the development of the tank in question by this point, in favor of telling you all about this 183mm gun and its particular Hesh round. I do this for two reasons, the first being that this is the main focus of the vehicles I am talking about today, as well as the commonality between them, and second of all, it's just so extremely cool, the thing. So this gun, first of all, to clear up a misconception I've seen repeated a few times, it is not derived from a naval gun. It fires these squash head rounds at 716 meters per second, that is 2,350 feet per second, using a lot of propellant. We don't know exactly how much was used, but we do know that the total weight of the propellant case was 33 kilograms or 73 pounds, so probably quite a lot. The shell itself weighed in at 72.6 kilograms or 160 pounds, of which 17 kilograms or 37.5 pounds was RDX, equivalent to 21.8 kilograms or 48 pounds. That is a lot to remember. Anyway, the combined weight of the full round, 105.6 kilograms or 233 pounds, is monstrous. That's almost twice as heavy as I am. Launching this round of the gun, you could probably imagine, created a colossal recoil weight of 87 tons. Testing of this L4 gun on a Conqueror and a Centurion saw these results. So yeah, safe to say this thing would be more than sufficient to turn any IS-3 it met into a WAS-3. Okay, that joke was bloody terrible. So, quite the fantastic gun there. Setting aside for now the miserably immense task that was reloading the bloody thing. Now, where shall we put the gun? The answer came in the FV215. Yeah, this is the part where, like, 4 people get confused and everyone familiar with British tank history chuckles smugly thinking about these 4 people. Yes, Blurry, I know you're doing that right now. The, as it was officially called, Tank Heavy No. 2 183mm gun FV215, which for the rest of the video I'll just call FV215, was designed on the FV200 series of Universal tanks, which you might remember from previous video, with the ideal of bringing even more firepower to battle than its cousin FV214 Conqueror through a taller rear-mounted turret to fit the huge 183mm gun. The hull was left mostly similar, so this turret shall be my main focus here. It was a rather boxy, welded turret, a bit of an oddity for British tanks at the time. Conqueror, Centurion and others all used cast designs. I'm not sure why exactly they made this change here. The exact armor thickness of the face of the turret is not confirmed, but apparently it will withstand fire from 100mm guns in a 30-degree arc, and a value of 254mm was alleged by World of Tanks. Now, I don't usually trust Wargame with any sort of tank information past like the very surface level of things, but in this case they do appear to have a point. The FV215's turret weighed 20.3 tons, while the Conqueror's weighed about 18, and since armor was rather skimmed out on with the root and rear of the FV215 reduced to only 17mm compared to Conqueror's 51, it does actually appear quite plausible that FV215 may have had an alarmingly well-protected turret front, comparable to or possibly even exceeding Conqueror's. The same coincidence rangefinder carried over from Conqueror to FV215, although it was now in use with the Gunner rather than Commander. Speaking of the Commander, the whole Hunter-Killer system of the Conqueror appears to have been dropped as a whole for this new design, sadly. What the Commander did get access to, however, was an M2HB 50 cal machine gun for anti-aircraft work, which, to my knowledge, that appears to be the only time a British tank design, a domestic one, has ever chosen to have that. Usually, unlike the Americans, the British gave nothing in the ways of pintle-mounted secondary armament, and when they did, it tended to be a pathetic little 7.62, and not even with much elevation, just an anti-infantry tool that, well, I mean, it works, but it was quite certainly no match. It was quite odd that they decided to add one onto this one singular design. Never before, never again. I seriously can't wrap my head around it. Similarly strange is the incomprehensible mounting of the coaxial 7.62 machine gun, placed in a box in the roof. Actually, I don't even know if this technically counts as coaxial, it's just weird. What the hell, Britain? Even the French are more conventional than this with their tank designs. Right in the middle of the turret then was the huge 183mm L4A1 gun, in the typical British mantletless fashion. According to World of Tanks, it was 120mm, and there was a separate FV215B183 model. but this is a complete lie. Complete fabrication. No 120mm version of this tank existed. I mean, why would it exist when the Conqueror's right there? Makes no sense. Anyway, the FV215 was shaping up to be a pretty good heavy tank. However, there was a slight issue to be had. This was 1951, the Conqueror project was still a very new thing, not even fully completed yet, so trying to create and push into service a brand new highly experimental variant with a brand new highly experimental gun on this already brand new highly experimental chassis was deemed nothing short of lunacy. Everything could go wrong, and as everyone knows, it's rather safe to assume this meant everything thus would go wrong. So instead of actually producing this wonderful but unproven new gamble of a heavy tank railway, the Ministry of Supply issued a report ordering the creation of a new vehicle mounting the 183mm L4A1 in a more sensible, more mature Centurion hull. Not really at this point all of this intended to be an actual fighting vehicle to produce, but rather just as a sort of testbed, stopgap, you know, to, as they said, obtain experience of firing such a large gun from the Centurion hull. And yes, that's right, ladies and others, this is the part where everyone's favorite FV4005 shows up. Though, as some of you might notice, this in the picture looks nothing like the FV4005. Where's our gigantic barnhouse? Well, this here is FV4005 Stage 1, the slightly overshadowed first prototype of our hero tank of today, and it's definitely got a lot of work to do before it gets to the point that we know. Also, its name apparently would have been Centaur, though this was by no means an official designation, only Vicus's project name for it, only mentioned in Vicus's own company account files. Officially, this vehicle was named Heavy Anti-Tank SP No. 1 FV4005 Stage 1. The initial variant had a completely open-air platform, I can't even call it a turret, which held up the L4A1 on a mount with apparently 10 degrees of elevation and 5 of depression, though the gun appears to only ever have been left on the traverse log mounted on the hull, giving it a constant 2-degree elevation. Behind and to the right of the gun was a revolving loader assist, frequently mistaken for an autoloader. Its job was simply to rotate the next round into the loader's hands for him to load into the breech, unlike autoloaders, which also include a rammer to load the round into the breech directly, no human work needed. Off to the left you will see the ammunition stowage box, and the gunner set in a portion in front of this box. While 360-degree turret traverse was possible, firing angles were limited to 45 degrees to each side, since the immense recoil of the gun would cause the whole thing to tip over if fired full broadside. Yeah, KV2 issues here. In fact, even firing directly forward required some preparation, with a recoil spade at the rear, a sort of dozer blade looking thing that dug into the ground to keep the vehicle from rolling back. God knows they need it. Some trials were done with this vehicle, and I can only assume they were rather happy with the concept, as a more complete Stage 2 was soon to be worked on. The FV4005 Stage 2, the one everyone knows and loves, finally comes with this gigantic metal box of a turret, made from 14mm steel plates, seeing as this was to be a first look at what a production FV4005 might be like, and thus needed to be at the very least protected to some degree from small arms fire and the like. This turret featured a mantletless design yet again. Toward the left of the gun was a little box in which a coaxial 7.62 machine gun, though this time in a normal bloody configuration thanks, as well as the gunner sight were located. Along the side and rear walls of the turret, a total of 12 rounds were held for the main gun, which in War Thunder is just about as dangerous as you might already be guessing, but back to that later. There was also a sort of foldable ramp that acted with the door in the back. Yes, the thing was tall enough for a full-size door in the back, yeah, to help with speedy ammunition replenishment with an external supply truck. And in addition, there appears to be a ramp of some sort being placed on the inside, connected to the breech, to simply slide rounds into that breech, rather than having to actually lift them. Even then though, I don't expect the job of the two loaders in this thing was to any extent a popular one. The recoil system was also changed to one that, in firing trials, proved superior. Actually, speaking of recoil, oh yes, it was bad. Really bad. Without deploying the recoil spade at the rear, the front of the tank would be lifted 43 centimeters off the ground when firing, as well as pushed 23 centimeters backwards, so oh yeah, good job on that little device for apparently approximately halving the lifting thing. though it is said that it didn't help too much with the backwards displacement. Either way, I think most would agree that this wouldn't have been a particularly desirable vehicle to operate in, or to be anywhere near for that matter. And as such, I do feel quite sorry for the men who had to go through testing this gun and vehicle at different elevation and traverse angles with and without the recoil speed, overall firing 150 and I can only guess rather painful rounds. Ah, look what time it is. Yes, first of all, it is time for another nice warm cup of tea, but also, it's time for another round of World of Tanks delusion. I have been informed recently that apparently Wargaming used to believe this thing was armed with a 123mm 4-round clip-fed auto-loaded gun, firing AP, APDS, and HESH rounds. I don't believe I need to explain why this is stupid. Also, apparently since then they have decided to fix this odd decision by replacing the gun with a 150mm 2-round clip-fed auto-loaded gun, firing APCR, heat, and HESH rounds. I honestly can't think of anything more to say here, so everyone watching, just do me a favor, go up to Wargaming, point and laugh, would you? Oh, also, it turns out the model for it in the main game in PC has the correct gun. I'm truly astonished. Anyway, enough rambling on about the wrong game. Let's get back to a place of logic and reason. Yes, as I tell you about what happened to the FV215 project next. So, the year is 1955, and now that the L4A1 gun has been tested to a reasonable degree of success, as has been the FV214 hull, which in fact goes into service the same year, and the FV215 project is set to see its first 2 constructed pre-production vehicles. Sadly, the anti-aircraft 50 cal has to be substituted by a 7.62, bloody shame. But that's okay, prototype number 1 is going to be completed in 1957, troop trials will be held, and... In 1957, the FV215 and FV4005 projects were both cancelled. You may remember from my previous video on the Conqueror these 3 things. Advances in technology made the 120mm gun obsolete, the IS-3 turned out to be none of what had been feared, and Soviet doctrine shifted into a focus more on medium tanks and later main battle tanks. Similar story here. A brand new technology was by now in the works, the anti-tank guided missile, frequently cited as one of the killers of big HESH philosophy, and having some really great selling points to back itself up. Compared to traditional guns which had issues at range, ATGMs could fly to a target at significantly longer distances. You see, an FV4005 gunner spotting a T-55 at a distance of 2 kilometers would have had to range find the target, lay his sights on it, and then mutter a prayer under his breath that, for one, the target didn't say drive away the time taken, which, to my knowledge, is something tanks tend to do, you know, move about instead of sitting stationary asking to be shot. And for another, prevailing winds wouldn't redirect his great big round from where he aims to straddle by a good 50 meters and give the surrounding wildlife the worst and possibly last day of their lives. In comparison, given an ATGM, the same gunner could simply find himself a nice target up to 4 kilometers away, aim, watch on as the thing gracefully glided in a straight line into the enemy tank, and rejoice as a hypersonic jet of copper is injected through the missile into the thing, blowing it into tiny little bits. As much as I love big, inconvenient, unreliable cannons, as you may have noticed from my past videos, I can't defend my boy here, the L4A1 just had to go. Okay, this is getting far too sad for the FV4005, let's now just move on to War Thunder and see how good it is there. Unfortunately, the story doesn't get too much better, as I believe everyone who has used it is of the same opinion. It's kind of funny, you know, when it works once in a while, but if you're playing to actually perform well, this isn't the tank for you. One might assume it's a glass cannon, you know, destroying anything in its path, but also being destroyed by anything in its path, in a similar vein to every other high-caliber, high-explosive launcher, but there is where one would be very much mistaken. The FV4005 is no glass cannon, you see, it's a glass roulette wheel. Are you feeling lucky? If so, go and devastate some enemy tanks, but if not, get ready for a whole lot of wasted rounds doing no damage, which appears to happen particularly often against Panthers. Yeah, Centurion was right all those years ago, just go play the Charioteer instead. But for those of you brave enough to try the FV4005, I'm going to make some attempt at a guide on what you should try to do with it, starting with telling you all about its stats. We shall start off with the gun, the real star of our show here. It's... well, I have little praise to give its in-game performance. Sadly, Gaijin seems to think that this underutilized shell, they call it, should act like Heichi with anemia. Unlike the devastation this round causes in real life, War Thunder has Hesh deal damage in a very weird way. If you take a look at the penetration value on your Hesh round, that there says 228mm, you may think this means you can either penetrate or overpressure, leading to the round being better than regular HE. What appears to be happening instead, according to a certain Reddit post, is that when hitting a plate thicker than the pen value, overpressure damage seems to just get disabled, making a HE round that just gets affected by volumetric and sometimes forgets to deal any damage. I can't say for sure whether this is exactly what's happening, since there are so many weird instances of no damage where there should be a catastrophic explosion, or an instant kill where it shouldn't be able to do that, and bugger if I can figure out what happens when an upper front plate overpressure to a panther just kills only the transmission and maybe some of the hull crew, but not any of the turret crew, the actually important stuff. But I do believe there is some form of unclear method to this madness. One thing I do have to note is Hesh seems to quite like sloped armor, as can be seen in this test against an IS-3 right here. Hesh overpressure seems to work better as you get to the sides of the turret sloped further away. This at least works into a certain tipping point, where you reach the angle of ricochet, obviously. The reload speed of 32.5 basic to 25 seconds aced won't be doing you any favors either. Optics also aren't amazing, with a zoom of 2.5x to 5x that, combined with the not amazing muzzle velocity of 716 meters per second, make a sniping role slightly inconvenient compared to a conventional tank with something like an L7, but it's certainly not out of the question, it's possible. Gun handling is acceptable. A traverse rate of 16 degrees per second horizontal and 4 degrees per second vertical certainly won't give you any remotely quick reaction time, but it serves its job, and a maximum traverse angle of 15 degrees elevation, 7 of depression, and 45 degrees to each side can be limiting sometimes, but easy enough to get used to and work around. Next up is survivability, of which there is practically none. The 14mm thick turret with negligible sloping is also, to make things worse, a gigantic target, what with this being the tallest British armoured fighting vehicle ever built. It'll stop a 7.62 coaxial machine gun, I suppose, but not much more than that. So if your enemy team is composed entirely of light AA Mark 1s, which you might quickly notice is never, rejoice. Don't count on the large space possibly giving Spall a hard time either. It won't when the entirety of the side and rear walls is lined with your 12 very explosive rounds, as mentioned earlier. And as for smokes, you get no smokes, so covering your tracks as you move around the battlefield is impossible. Speaking of moving around the battlefield, the final point on the iron triangle is mobility, which FV4005 also lacks. I've not the slightest clue what possessed some employee at Gaijin to make this thing's top speed a shocking 28 km per hour, when the Centurion Mark III is literally built on, and is in fact lighter than, gets to move at 35, but with Gaijin being Gaijin, there's absolutely no way to drill the most basic of horse sense into the heads of their bug report managers. Hell, these guys need to be spoon-fed the Archimedes principle like 5-year-olds to figure out that pontoons make a Kachi float. Oh bugger, I wonder what pontoons were invented for. For the foreseeable future, you'll just have to accept your life of crawling around at a snail's pace. At the very least, a 10 km per hour reverse and neutral steering do help with overall mobility, allowing you to maneuver in tight spaces such as cities. So, all this taken into account, how should one play the FV4005? Well, honestly, it's difficult, but I think I've vaguely figured something out. First of all, you should check what map you've spawned into. So first, open maps. If you're in a map where urbanization is either scarce or absent, a defensive sniping role is the most popular tactic. Although optic zoom and muzzle velocity aren't the best, they are at least still serviceable at range, though of course the troubles of Hesh getting caught in either obstacles between you and the target or in volumetric armor on the target might cause some problems. Just be patient with it and you'll find some luck eventually. It's best to sit close to some solid cover to hide behind during your half-minute reload. And remember, your large presence and useless armor make it so that your best chances come from shooting enemies when they don't know you're there. The second type of map you might get then is an urban one. A map with plenty of buildings and corridors between those buildings is my personal favorite place to fight, in which the best tactic is to just run around being a menace. You'll never be able to push the front lines in something quite so inadequately armored as the FV4005, so instead, either support your teammates from the second line and provide heavy fire to deal with big scary targets, or be a rat and flank behind unsuspecting enemies to blast away. The good thing about urban maps is there's always cover nearby to keep you relatively safe as you reload, and the sharp corners can allow you to make use of either smart predictions of enemy positions or scout markers on a minimap to hit people in their sights as they emerge rather than having to face them frontally. Essentially, in both of these map types, the big thing to remember is the moment you're seen, you're dead. And the moment you see an enemy, if you've memorized how to get Hesh to work properly, they should be dead, but if they're not dead, you should want to have a nice big piece of cover to reverse behind and try a different target somewhere else. The other big thing to remember is don't take things too seriously. You're in the big punt gun in the box. It's by no means a competitive vehicle and you should never expect to get aces in it. You might once in a while and with quite some luck, but at the end of the day, the point of this vehicle is just to have some dumb fun, yes? So yes, that has been the FV4005, as well as some mention of the FV215, though sadly since this isn't in War Thunder, I cannot speak of its gameplay. Overall never meant to be a real combat vehicle, the FV4005 has little place outside of joke lineups and challenges, and as such I can't rate it any higher than C tier. Thus concludes my second bout of tank ramblings, this time on the FV4005. If you wish to see more vehicles like these, type down in the comment section any suggestions you might have for tanks I should talk about next, or even videos of other types. If you do feel especially kind today, a simple gesture of a quick like and subscribe would be heavily appreciated, as not only does clout make me feel rather good, a rarity in life nowadays, it helps get YouTube's algorithm to see me in a better light, hopefully at some point enough so to push this and similar videos to more like-minded people who may enjoy it. That should probably be all. Thank you for watching.